great point I wanted to share today where I just attended the International Game Developers Association, IGDA, Los Angeles online event for hobbyists to professionals. I don't think they did a video of this one. At least I couldn't tell from my end just as a spectator. So unfortunately, it won't be on the YouTube channel where there are other talks, but there are other talks on there worth seeing. Now, the point I wanted to actually make today was that there was an emphasis by about 2/3 of the people on that panel when they were talking about their backgrounds, who they said they weren't great students, right? They didn't necessarily excel at school, at test taking in certain fields. Now, I know plenty of other folks in games who were great students. So by all means, if you're proficient in math, if you're good at history, good at science, it's not going to hurt you. Probably open up some more doors, doesn't hurt. But 2/3 of this panel of people who were talking about going from hobbyist to professional game developer were focusing on the point that they weren't necessarily great at school. That was not where necessarily their strength was. And one of the things it reminded me of is when I was in middle school and high school, I was a bit sort of an odd duck in that, I was a science kid. I decided science fair, I was that kind of guy. But also I was in woodshop class. I was in metal shop. I did a lot of making stuff in my hands, because what I realized was that a lot of the folks in there, and I don't know if you've necessarily had the chance to have shop classes where you're at. I know a lot of schools have defunded some of the manual labor type, vocational type of courses, but I mean, heck, art class, right? Any of these kind of things where you're making something. And there was not often a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram between the woodshop kids and the people who were taking college credit history, college credit government, college credit science. And what I want to focus on is that there's nothing wrong with that way of being, that way of thinking, that way of doing stuff. In that, in fact, when the people I meet and see who are proficient as game developers, whether they're coming out as designers, sound people, writers, programmers, etc., really what's happening is quite often it's much more that woodshop mode of thinking. It's that woodshop attitude. And again, I mean, I don't make it kind of bash too much either of my friends either, where doing some woodshop involve trigonometry at times to make sure you're measuring and cutting the right things, right? It involves using a bit of math, but it's very practical. It's very applied math. And the same is true where I know I've had another video we were talking about, like, even if you weren't necessarily proficient at high-level calculus, high-level geometry, proofs and all that, you might still do just fine in game development, because the type of math we use is very pragmatic, very, you might be doing some fancy rendering code, but for a lot of the gameplay stuff, it's arithmetic. It's a lot of simple expressions. It's comparing this to that. It's adding this to that. It's multiplying this by some number and then playing with the number until it's right, where you push play, you see what it does, you check it out, you try it, you test run it, you figure out, well, it's a little too fast, a little too slow, let me try dialing the number down. You don't necessarily have to be a sciencey, mathy person to be proficient in that use of numbers. And what I want to reassure today is that if you felt like you've taken classes, you've been in school, and you made it, you're doing okay, but didn't necessarily excel. Some people hold themselves back from that, and they feel like, okay, well, because I didn't get A's, because I wasn't a top student and acing physics exams, well, I'm not going to try game development. And again, out of the skill sets I knew at high school level, the people who were doing good kind of stuff in woodshop class are really, in many cases, much more kind of the attitude it took to build things for games, where week after week they show up, putting boards together, sanding things down. They got plans, they coordinate, they collaborate, they build parts of things that fit together. All that is really what we're doing in game development. So it may be that you kind of just, as far as your affinities go, and I'm a strong believer anybody can kind of learn anything they put their mind to and want to excel at, but we still tend to have affinities of sports we're more natural in, or activities we feel better in, or feel better dancing, feel better singing, whatever. But if you feel like where you have some affinity is building things, making stuff, right? Maybe you were like me and just did a bunch of origami at some stage of your life. You might find that actually has a lot more overlap for what you need to do to build games than getting high marks on quizzes, than writing a compelling essay. Writing skills are valuable. Again, I'm not saying any of those are bad, but it's a different way of thinking to construct stuff, to make things, to build stuff, to take what doesn't exist yet, put in the time, the monotonous steps sometimes it takes to function by function, variable by variable, class by class, put these things together, feature by feature, bug by bug, until you got a thing you're proud of and can share and show. So maybe what you actually need to take to it is a bit more of a carpenter mindset, a bit more of a woodworker mindset, and not stress out so much over what kind of puzzle you can pass, what kind of fact you can memorize, what sort of, other kind of thing you can do with your brain. That's not necessarily the same as just building something. Anyway, I think I got the point today. I'll cut it off. I just wanted to share that point because it was such a nice thing to hear from 2/3 of a panel talking about going from hobbyist to professional developer, where, one of the guys, so Christopher McLaughlin, who I will say both A, alumni of Home Team Game Dev, was a project lead, contributed on some cool projects. But also, I like to emphasize, Home Team is part of a complete breakfast. By no means were we the only thing he did. He spent 10 years teaching himself different kind of programming and watching videos and training himself up and stuff, and directly emailed CEO. He had a really cool story about how he kind of found his way into the role he's at today. So we're not trying to say, all Home Team or anything, but he specifically made the point that, like, he thinks his strongest asset isn't that he's necessarily the smartest, isn't necessarily the best at any single thing, except that when there's a problem, he will just keep beating his head against it until he's through the other side of it. He is just determined to keep pushing up against it. And I'll say that that's probably also a great summary again of what to me was like what made us good as woodshop kids. Anyway, that's it for the day. Catch you next time.